My name is Sandy Adomaitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey, writers, it's Sandy. I'm coming to you on a rainy night in Studio City, the crown jewel of the San Fernando Valley, where the iconic Ventura Boulevard runs through neighborhoods including Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Encino, Tarzana, and Woodland Hills, connected by the 101 freeway. Did you binge anything over the holidays? Go to the movies? A lot of you did go to see Avatar, Fire and Ash because it dominated the 2025 Christmas New Year's season box office by generating hundreds of millions worldwide. Meanwhile, Timothée Chalamet's Marty Supreme performed pretty strongly alongside hits like Zootopia 2. Remember last week's episode, which was about vertical storytelling and how writers are finding it a new frontier, and it's becoming a good way to break into or stay active in the industry? I came across an interesting article from theankler.com, and I wanted to discuss it with you. I thought this would be a great companion piece to last week's episode. The title is Gen Z is Huge. Their TV shows are tiny, and how Hollywood is panicking, written by Whitney Friedlander. HBO's I Love LA is the kind of comedy the brand does best. A clickbaity show about a niche demo that's bound to get headlines and awards coverage, if not broad viewership. Variety put creator star Rachel Sennott on its cover ahead of the show's November 2nd debut, declaring her ode to the dreams, ambitions, and clueless narcissism of a particular brand of 20 and early 30-somethings as generational text, and labeling it a next-gen version of Lena Dunham's polarizing 2010s HBO series Girls. Now, I have to interject here. I was late to Girls. I didn't watch it when it first came out, but I'm pretty sure that was 2012 when it came out. Back to the article. Critics fell right into HBO's clutches, either claiming that I Love LA made them feel seen or getting very angry about the show, while USA Today's critic Kelly Lawler deemed it a prestige TV fantasy of the chronically online. Vulture's Nicholas Quah wrote that, if nothing else, the show will be a time capsule for this particular moment in culture when Los Angeles teems with influencers chasing clout. Underlying the discussion, the uneasy reality that TV once defined young adulthood, now Gen Z defines culture, and TV is struggling to keep up. Viewership data backs this up. 65% of what 16 to 34-year-olds watch is library TV, not new series. In other words, the dominant youth audience isn't discovering new Hollywood shows. They're rewatching old ones. HBO is bullish on I Love LA. On Thursday, it announced a second season renewal for the series, calling it among the fastest growing of its original comedies, averaging nearly 2 million cross-platform viewers in the U.S. These are hardly it Welcome to Dairy numbers, but we can't all be genre series based on blockbusters IPs. Okay, writers, Welcome to Dairy. If you don't know, it's a supernatural horror television series that serves as a prequel to the films It, which came out in 2017, and It Chapter 2, which came out in 2019. The series premiered on HBO on October 26, 2025. And unless you live in a sewer, we all know that it comes from the legendary horror author Stephen King, who wrote It, his iconic 1986 novel about a shape-shifting creature that preys on children in the fictional town of Derry, Maine. The season average was 11.5 million US viewers per episode and 20 million global viewers per episodes. Back to the article. When I asked Sennott Thursday at the show's premiere press conference what exactly it meant to be a quintessential Gen Z comedy, she laughed. Even she had no idea. I love LA draws inspiration, not just from Girls, she said, but also HBO's Sex and the City and Entourage and FX Atlanta. Ideally, what we wanted to create was our own unique tone, something that felt unique to us and was very specific to now, she added. Sennett's co-star, Jordan Firstman, 34, whose own resume includes several shows in this genre, Search Party, English Teacher, highlighted one key distinction between today's learning to adult TV and the previous generation's version. The ethos of a lot of what was going on in that millennial renaissance was very self-effacing, like, I'm just going to rip into myself and show that I'm depressed and show my depression, he said at the presser. I think Gen Z has a bit of a sillier, more fun approach. For those who spark to it, I Love LA's unhinged energy is definitely fun. But for those who don't, there aren't many alternatives in the quest to be the archetypical Gen Z comedy. The show's closest contemporary is FX Adults, about a chosen family of 20-somethings squatting in one of their childhood homes in Queens. Gen Z is the country's second largest demographic after millennials, nearly 70 million, an audience Hollywood's future depends on. And yet, the marketplace for shows geared toward 20-somethings is almost wide open. I talked to creators, adults, Ben Kronengold and Rebecca Shaw, Laid's Nahnatchka Khan, and Stumble's Jeff Ostroff. I once was in a fire drill with Jeff Ostroff. It was weird. Jeff wasn't weird. It was just a weird moment, but I don't know. If I ever do a Patreon, I'll tell that story in another time. Stumbles, Jeff Ostroff, and current and former development execs, including FX EVP Kate Lambert and NBCU's exec VP of comedy development, Jeff Meyerson, to dig into the state of Gen Z comedy, what this cohort is watching and not, and why their very specific, extremely online vibe and influencer-shaped cultural worldview makes them so tough to pinpoint and please. Friends, Living Single, How I Met Your Mother, these shows connected because they're about love and work and how things change when the first of the crew has a baby, buys a house, gets a new job, relatable milestones to deconstruct, laugh about, and celebrate. But Gen Z doesn't have much to celebrate in these arenas. Unemployment rates for young workers hit 10.8% over the summer, compared to the 4.3% overall. And when they are not on the job, they're miserable and feel undervalued. AI and other forces mean, as a source recently told New York Magazine, there's no reason to deal with the headaches of having young employees who frequently do the wrong thing, who frequently take up time and space. Wait, gotta pause there and just say, what I've noticed out in the workforce, because as you know, I sometimes will jump back in to work on a TV show, is that the younger workforce is not really being trained and taught the way I certainly was when I was coming up. Now, there also is the flip side of that. I also see the younger workforce not ask questions and look really annoyed when you tell them anything. I've also seen the younger workforce really lean into that whole fake it till you make it, never let anybody know that you don't know what's going on. There are absolutely situations where that's called for, but when you go to work, you deserve someone to train you. You deserve to be able to ask a lot of questions. And I think both sides should meet in the middle, and I am available for consultation. Where are we on this article? Oh, we're talking about Gen Z not being happy at work. And as for love, not only are fewer of them dating than in previous generations, but according to a recent survey from datingadvice.com and Kinsey, nearly half of Gen Z adults have never even had sex. It's also harder than ever to figure out exactly what Gen Z is into, or to keep up with it as the smallest screens increasingly drive the culture. Jeff Astroff, 59, an alum of the Friends writing room and co-creator of the new NBC cheerleading mockumentary Stumble, points out, speaking with authority as a parent of two 20-somethings, that if David Crane and Marta Kaufman's series took place now, Chandler would go on his phone the entire episode. There's no way a TV show can match the speed at which language, trends, and conversations happen online, nor can those cultural forces be ignored. Adult creator Kronengold, 29, and Shaw, 30, told me they get around this by creating their own in-show language, invented and shared by the central friend group. When a character wants to get something off their chest, but doesn't want it to be a thing, for example, they'll preface it with a mind wipe, okay? A mind wipe to people will be talking, and one will say, mind wipe, I stole a bunch of bananas. The other person will say, hey, kids do things like that. And then the other character will come back with, that was last Tuesday. So mind wipe. Back to the article. A big part of Friends' legacy is its lasting coinages. Remember, on a break, lobster, friend zone. Kate Lambert, executive vice president of development at Fox Entertainment, says she bought Adults in a pitch meeting, not necessarily because it featured young characters, but because she was looking for an ensemble comedy. And in a world where anyone can become a named influencer online, also coming out of a peak TV bubble when many talents still had their own deals that were largely intended to set them up for star vehicles, it's hard to create and cast an ensemble series. We're always looking for really specific characters and really specific voices, she says. But hopefully there's something universal in that character, in that story, in that show that latches on to a larger audience. Is Gen Z worth the chase? There's also a more existential problem for TV. The most vibrant Gen Z comedy right now isn't on TV at all. It's playing on TikTok and YouTube, where 22-year-olds narrate their dating disaster, roommate betrayals, and quarter-life freakouts directly to millions of followers. The creator economy didn't just steal young viewers' attention, it stole their genre. For this generation, the funniest shows about being young are made by people their own age, on their own phones, in formats that evolve by the hour. Overcompensating and adults found audiences. Each series hit the top 10 on Prime Video and Hulu, but neither cracked Nielsen's streaming charts and were given second season renewals eventually. But a senior exec at a separate platform tells me that the Broad Youth Ensemble is trickier at the moment. So tricky, it might not even be worth targeting, no matter how desirable the 18 to 34 demo remains for advertisers. I have to interject here. I have never heard so tricky, it might not be worth targeting, blah, 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 blah. I am not surprised that there is no name attached to that quote. Oh, it goes on. Everything is cyclical, the development executive says, but I don't see in the short term that I'm telling the creative community that I'm looking for a young ensemble as the prototype of what we're trying to do next. Okay, I'm skipping and scanning. Even on shows that feature young characters, they often are moved to the background. Astroff's Stumble is based on the Netflix docuseries Chair, which ended up making household names out of small-town college athletes. Still, Astroff says he and his sister, co-writer Liz Astroff, were directed to drive the story towards adult characters. This is partly because the show tested well with older audiences ahead of its premiere, he added. It now follows the Reba McEntire sitcom Happy Places on NBC's Friday night lineup, and the hope is to build a connection for those viewers who still want to watch linear TV on the primetime schedule. He notes that the push-pull to highlight one demo while also trying for broad appeal isn't new, especially on broadcast. Back in the 90s, when Don Ohlmeyer ran NBC, he was worried that Friends was too young, Astroff recalls. So the writers developed an older character named Pat the Cop, who was supposed to ground the group. Pat never had to report for duty. When I asked Astroff if he thinks things would be different if Stumble had premiered on Peacock, or if the kids could become the breakout characters as they did with Fox's Glee, Astroff laughs and said, "If I could answer any of those questions, I'd be retired." When I asked NBC Universal's head of scripted comedy development, Jeff Meyerson, the same question about Stumble, he said NBCU is looking for shows with broad appeal for the biggest possible audience, regardless of the platform. The difference between NBC and Peacock isn't their targets, he continues, but rather the storytelling and how it aligns with cadence and viewing habits on broadcast. Appointment TV, more episodes, versus streaming, shorter seasons on demand. When we're developing with creators, it's much more about the urgency of storytelling on Peacock versus on broadcast, he says. We feel like there's more of a rhythm to having the St. Denis Medicals or the Stumbles of the world, having a higher episode count where you can fall in love with these characters, and it's much more episodic by nature. Lots of pixels have been spilled over how self-involved Friends sextants were, or why Neil Patrick Harris's Barney on How I Met Your Mother was problematic, actually. In the 2010s, with more female-led stories like Fox Hulu's The Mindy Project, Fox's New Girl, and ABC's Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, the narcissism became more self-aware and unapologetic. The Bee was the first show that Nahnatchka Khan got on the air as a creator. Premiering in 2012, it was a dark and sardonic program about a fresh-off-the-boat ingenue, Dreama Walker's June, who moves in with a manipulative roommate, Kristin Ritter's Chloe. There are so many reasons why this show shouldn't have worked, from its very title to a scene in the pilot where Chloe gets a kid drunk. But Khan, 52, says she had the full blessing of Paul Lee, then the president of ABC Entertainment. He's now the CEO of Whip, and himself a bit of an outlier in the industry. The Bee only lasted 2 seasons. Okay, I wasn't quite sure what WHIP was, and it's pretty huge. This is what their website says. WHIP is a global independent studio, distinctive in its talent-first approach by inspiring storytellers to do what they love, create. Led by entertainment veteran Paul Lee, WHIP's critically acclaimed premium slate includes Brad Ingleby's Emmy Award-winning limited series, Mayor of Easttown, which I loved, starring Kate Winslet, as well as his new prestige drama series, Task, starring Mark Ruffalo. Oh, I did not know that. Task was from the creator of Mayor of Easttown, so now I will watch it. And it goes on and on. They did Dickens for HBO with Haley Seinfeld, and The Summer I Turned Pretty for Prime Video, and tons more. A new year brings new writing goals, and I am committed to finishing my true crime memoir in 2026. I've been working on this book for years, and we all know that the details you jot down in January tend to become fuzzy by June. I wish I had Novellium, our sponsor, a fantastic writing tool that quickly turns chaos into clear, well-organized stories when I started writing. Whether you write directly on Novellium or upload an existing draft, your characters and setting details, timeline events, and plot pacing are automatically pulled from your story to view at a glance. And in real time, Novellium catches the problems you'd miss on your own, like plot tangles, pacing issues, continuity errors, even character logic slips. Novellium isn't another AI content generator. It never shares your data. Instead, Novellium keeps you in control through every stage of your writing process. It's your text editor, character files, continuity checker, and more in one organized, lightning-fast platform. You can even use Novellium to share your work securely with beta readers and keep track of their comments. Don't wait until your draft is finished. Get the most out of your writing this year. Try Novellium today and get your first month free using my special code HANGOUT. Go to novelium.so. That's novelium.so. Don't forget to use the special code HANGOUT and get 1 month free. Back to the article. Last year, Khan and Sally Branford McKenna created Laid for Peacock. Adapted from an Australian format, it has a procedural structure. Each episode randomly kills off a former paramour of its lead, the 30-something event planner Ruby, Stephanie Hsu. The humor of Laid for that specific audience is you wanted to take something relatable and familiar. This girl just can't find the one she's been searching for. And then bring in this sort of heightened element of people start dying one by one. Khan says, in a way, Don't Trust the Bee also had that heightened element for the same target audience. Laid was released as a binge watch in December and canceled after one season. Debbie Liebling's storied producing career includes several years in comedy development at Comedy Central, where she was instrumental in shepherding then unknowns Trey Parker and Matt Stone's South Park. Liebling blames the dearth of edgy young adult focused comedies on the demise of cable that has glutted platforms like Comedy Central and TBS, once staffed by young execs looking to nurture and develop young talent and stories for young skewing audiences. People try to plan on having hits, but hits happen by throwing the net wide and taking some chances, she says, adding that Pen 15 went under the radar at Hulu because executives were focused on more expensive projects. This gave it time to find its niche audience of millennials nostalgic for the days of crushes and algebra. So often, people are afraid of diverting from what they think people want, Liebling says. But she also concedes that for a show to grab new audiences now requires something that is so viral to get that kind of commitment. So, is it that young adults aren't watching TV or that they're just not watching what the industry is selling? 57% of tweens, teens, and young adults watch TV and movies more than older generations think they do. The Center for Scholars and Storytellers, CSS, at UCLA found in its annual Teens and Screens report released in October, they're increasingly interested in content with relatable stories more than fantasy and real-world issues or aspiration stories. And 61% of those surveyed would rather see romantic relationships that depict a friendship between a couple, not just sex. I don't know if I believe that. I can't remember the last time I saw a young adult in front of the TV. Can you, writers? Over 10 years ago, it could have even been 15 years ago, I remember asking my friend's son where the remote was. I was over their place, and he just shrugged his shoulders and said he had no idea. I joked with his mom, when I was his age, I knew where the remote was at every moment of the day. She said that he'd watch reruns with her, like Seinfeld's, but other than that, he doesn't turn the TV on. So, I don't know. Back to the article. Both Adults and I Love LA have sex scenes. So does Overcompensating, while Abbott Elementary keeps things pretty G-rated. But intimate relationships aren't the A storyline. The friend groups are also an intersectional mix of genders, races, and sexual orientations without making any of these things really an issue. Everyone is woke, even if they hate that word's connotation, and characters are aware of their privilege. That true Whittaker's Alani is the wealthy daughter of a famous actor, runs as an undercurrent on I Love LA. And Adults doesn't really engage with how much longer the group can go on living rent-free in Samar's family home. Both shows also lean into the fact that young people are just inevitably conceited and narcissistic jerks. On I Love LA, Odessa Zion's influencer, Tallulah, has phone sex in her friend's bed. On Adults, Owen and Amita become convinced they caused their shared therapist to end their life. He actually slipped in the shower. We always say they're not good people, Adults co-creator Shaw says, but they're getting there. Writers, what do you think? Did me reading this article to you, was it helpful in any way? Did it inspire you? Spark any new ideas? If you're not aiming for a specific audience and just want to tell your story, that is fantastic. Nothing is holding you back, and you should put your main focus on that. At the same time, though, staying informed about what's happening in the entertainment industry can be incredibly helpful for any writer, even if you're not chasing fame. It provides valuable insight into the current market, evolving trends, and practical tips for getting your work and produced and sold.
And that's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your positive feedback will help us keep the show going so we can continue bringing you more future episodes. Remember, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards, with executive producer Kristin Overn, Sandy Adomaitis, and myself, Terry Sampson. And our music is composed by Ethan Stoller.